It started with a sound, soft, rhythmic, and disturbingly tender. At first, I thought I was dreaming. You know, the kind of half-asleep state where the brain invents whispers and creaks and your imagination paints them into ghost stories. But then I heard it again, clearer this time, drifting down the hallway at 2:14 in the morning. It wasn't a random noise or the usual creaking of our old pipes.
No.
It was a voice. My wife's voice. Gentle, playful, soothing, and unmistakably speaking baby talk. But here's the thing. We don't have a baby. Never did. Never even tried. That moment, right there in the middle of the night, cracked open something inside me I didn't even know was fragile. And if you stick with me, I'll walk you through every chilling, confusing, and deeply personal step I took trying to find out who, or what, she was speaking to. Because what I discovered has turned our lives into something I still can't fully explain. Look, I know the internet is full of so-called creepy stories, wild Reddit confessions, and those YouTube videos you watch late at night when you can't sleep and need something thrilling to shake up your boredom. But I want you to hear me. This isn't entertainment for me. This isn't a prank. This isn't one of those haunted doll clickbait stories. I'm not telling this because I want views or subscribers. I'm telling this because I need answers. I need someone out there, maybe even you, to help me understand what's happening. And believe me, I know how insane it sounds. A man hears his wife cooing to a baby in the dead of night, and the twist is, they don't even have a kid? Yeah, I'd raise an eyebrow too. But if you give me a few minutes, just stay with me till the end, I promise you, what I found in the days that followed will make you question everything you think you know about memory, identity, and the secrets we keep from the people closest to us. If you've ever laid next to someone you thought you knew, shared a bed, a life, a future, and suddenly noticed something off, something you couldn't quite name but couldn't shake either, then you'll understand the pit that started to form in my stomach that night. And if you've ever loved someone so completely that even thinking something might be wrong with them feels like a betrayal, then you'll understand the guilt that kept me from confronting her right away. I didn't want to believe there was anything strange going on. I told myself, maybe I misheard. Maybe she was dreaming. Maybe she was on the phone with a friend and accidentally left her Bluetooth earbuds in. I reached for logic like a lifeline, but none of it held up. Because the next night it happened again. That's when I started recording. And I want you to ask yourself this as we go along. What would you do if you discovered the person you loved most was living a double life right under your nose? What would you do if you found evidence, actual, undeniable evidence, that your reality might not be the full story? You're not just watching this video to hear a weird story. You're here because your brain is wired like mine, restless, curious, suspicious of the ordinary. And this story? It's anything but ordinary. I'm going to walk you through this, detail by detail. I'll show you the recordings. I'll tell you what I found on her phone. I'll let you hear the audio I captured from our baby monitor, which, by the way, we didn't even own until 3 days ago, when I found one mysteriously plugged in behind the dresser in the guest room. I know. That sentence alone is enough to make your skin crawl. Mine still does. You're going to get the answers you're looking for, but not the ones you're expecting. So before we dive into the recordings, the footage, the strange behavior, and what's hidden in our basement, I want to take you back to the beginning. Because like any real psychological mystery, the truth doesn't just arrive. It unravels.
Slowly. Painfully.
With each thread you tug, the picture warps. And once you see it, you can't unsee it. We've lived in this house for 5 years now. It's quiet, suburban, the kind of neighborhood where people wave as they water their lawns. Our marriage? On the surface, it's solid. I met Rachel 8 years ago at a conference in Denver. She was this effortlessly confident woman with eyes that looked like they belonged in someone else's face. Wise, haunted, magnetic. I was drawn to her instantly. When we got married, it felt like the start of something grounded and safe, like finally exhaling after holding your breath for years. We moved to Oregon to slow down, to build something together. And for the most part, we did. Or at least, I thought we did. Now, let me make this clear. Rachel is not crazy. This story isn't about possession or madness or any easy, dramatic trope. This story is about the hidden rooms inside someone's mind. The kinds of secrets that don't look like secrets at all until you hold them up to the light. She's intelligent, compassionate, funny. She volunteers at a crisis center and bakes bread from scratch. She's the kind of person who remembers your birthday even if you only met her once. That's what makes this so hard to explain. That's what makes the footage I captured so hard to process. Because when you see someone you trust behave like a stranger in your own home, the effect isn't just fear, it's disorientation. Like gravity's gone sideways. The first night I recorded the audio, I set up my phone outside the door of our guest room. She always told me that room creeped her out. Said the light felt off in there. We'd never used it for anything more than storing junk, until suddenly, she started spending time in there. I didn't question it at first. People need space, right? But it was the way she closed the door softly behind her, the way she carried something wrapped in a blanket, the way she whispered. It all felt wrong. And when I played the audio back, my blood ran cold. Because it wasn't just cooing or lullabies. It was a conversation. My wife was talking to someone or something like a mother talks to an infant. Except the other voice? There was no other voice. And still she paused. She listened. She responded. I thought maybe I was losing it. Maybe I wanted to believe something sinister was happening just to inject some excitement into our quiet lives. But the pattern continued. The time of night. The length of the visits. The way she emerged looking dazed, almost euphoric. And then there was the humming. Always the same lullaby, always just a little too slow, like she was dragging the notes underwater. I started digging. I traced her old college records, found articles she'd written under a different name. I found a therapist's note buried in the bottom of her desk drawer, something about maternal delusion and dissociative episodes. But Rachel had never told me she saw a therapist. And more importantly, nothing in our lives pointed to that kind of history. At least not until I found the first picture. It was hidden inside an old photo album, one she said came from her grandmother. And in it Rachel, maybe 16 or 17, holding a baby.
Smiling.
But here's the thing, she never mentioned any siblings. Her parents are gone. And the house she grew up in? It burned down when she was 19. Total loss. You still with me? Because this is where it starts getting worse. You're probably wondering, why didn't I just confront her? Why didn't I walk into that room one night and demand to know what was going on? I wanted to.
God, I wanted to.
But something in me said not yet. Like whatever was happening needed to play out just a little further. Like the truth was almost ready to show itself. And the night I finally did open that door? Well, she wasn't alone. What I saw when I opened the door didn't make sense. Not then, not even now, after weeks of digging and watching the footage over and over like it might finally reveal something new. The room was dim, lit only by a string of soft white fairy lights strung haphazardly across the top of the bookcase. There was a small blanket on the floor, one I didn't recognize, faded with teddy bears stitched along the edge, and next to it sat a stuffed rabbit that definitely wasn't ours. Rachel was kneeling, her back to me, gently swaying as if rocking something in her arms. But there was nothing there. No doll. No cradle. Just her, cradling the air, whispering softly to someone who didn't exist, or at least shouldn't. She didn't hear me enter. I stood there, frozen, watching her murmur sweet nothings into a void, a soft, dreamy look on her face like she was caught in some private, impossible moment. And then she looked up, right through me. Her eyes were glassy, like she wasn't fully awake. And the most chilling part? She smiled. Not at me. At something beside her. I didn't say anything. I backed out slowly, heart racing, the floor groaning beneath my feet. I slept on the couch that night, staring at the ceiling in the dark, trying to piece together a puzzle I hadn't realized was missing any pieces. I started rethinking everything the past few months, the little moments I brushed off, the things I told myself didn't matter. The time I came home early and found her in the garage with the door locked. She said she was organizing old boxes, but the way she jumped when I called her name stuck with me. Or how she'd been unusually tired, claiming work was stressful, even though she'd just gone part-time at the nonprofit. She'd started journaling more, which wasn't strange by itself, but I never saw what she wrote. She kept the notebook with her at all times, even brought it into the bathroom. I told myself it was nothing. We all need privacy, right? But looking back now, every red flag I ignored glows brighter. I decided to check our security camera footage, the ones we'd installed after a string of car break-ins last fall. Most nights, there was nothing, just raccoons, deer, the occasional Amazon delivery. But 4 nights ago, at exactly 3:17 a.m., there was movement. From the side yard. The motion sensor caught a figure moving slowly from the tree line toward the house, tall, hooded, walking like they knew exactly where they were going. The camera didn't get a clear face, just the faintest reflection of eyes, glinting in the dark. But what chilled me more than the figure itself was what they were carrying, a small bundle wrapped in a soft yellow blanket. The same one I'd seen Rachel holding that night. I showed Rachel the footage later, pretending I'd just come across it by accident, and watched her reaction like a hawk. But she didn't even flinch. Just looked at me and said, "That's strange," before changing the subject to whether we should repaint the guest room. It was too smooth, too practiced. Like she'd expected me to see it eventually and had already planned what to say. That's when I realized I wasn't just dealing with something emotional or psychological. There was intention here. Something was being hidden carefully, methodically. And it might not be just Rachel hiding it. So I started watching other people too. Her co-worker, Lucas, for instance, a friendly enough guy, but lately, a little too invested in Rachel's well-being. I noticed how often he texted her, how she would smile at her phone, then quickly tuck it away. One night, I followed her when she said she was going to the pharmacy. Instead, she drove to a small park just outside of town. I parked a distance away and watched her meet Lucas near the benches by the duck pond. They didn't touch, not in any obvious way. But they spoke in hushed tones, and she handed him something wrapped in cloth. He held it for a moment, nodded, then slipped it into a backpack. I couldn't see what it was. But whatever it wasn't medication. Still, I wanted to believe it could all be explained. Maybe it was about a patient she was helping through her crisis center. Maybe the baby talk was part of a trauma simulation or support work. But that theory cracked when I found the pacifier. It was under the bed in the guest room. Old, worn, the rubber part chewed down slightly like it had been used. That wasn't something you used for training or therapy roleplay. That was something used by a baby. And yet, there was no baby. No records. No photos. No social worker visits. Nothing to even suggest a child had ever been in our home. I decided to dig deeper, quietly. I went through Rachel's old photo boxes again, and something finally clicked. One of the albums had photos of a hospital visit, Rachel in a gown, lying in bed, smiling. Next to her, a nurse holding a tiny pink-wrapped bundle. The caption read, *, just an hour old. *, I had never seen this photo before. When I confronted Rachel with it, she stared at it for a long time and said, "I don't remember this. I really don't." Her hands shook as she held the picture. But the tears that came afterward? I couldn't tell if they were from grief, confusion, or guilt. Around the same time, I started receiving anonymous emails. No subject line. No sender information. Just short messages. *, do you know who she really is? *, there's more in the attic. *, check the property records. *, the kind of stuff that would normally be laughable if you weren't already questioning your reality. The attic, though, that was something I hadn't considered. We rarely went up there. It was hard to access, and we'd always used the basement for storage. So when I finally climbed up there, flashlight in hand, I didn't know what to expect. What I found? Boxes. Not labeled. Just sealed with thick packing tape. And one of them had a name scrawled in black Sharpie. *Ellie. I haven't opened that box yet. Not because I'm afraid of what's inside, but because I think once I do, the last remaining illusion of normalcy in our life will evaporate. There's something about that name, something that feels wrong and familiar at the same time. Rachel's never mentioned anyone named Ellie. Not once. And yet that name shows up again, in an old yearbook I found in the bottom drawer of her study. A dedication written in the margin, *, To Ellie, my sweet girl. Love you always. Mom. Asterisk. And just like that, the line between coincidence and conspiracy began to blur. I started wondering about the house itself. We didn't build it, it was owned by a family before us, the Mannings, who sold it after some sort of tragedy. The real estate agent told us it was a quiet transition, but old neighbors have hinted otherwise. One even asked, "Do you still hear the crying at night?" I laughed it off at the time, but now I lie awake wondering what she meant. There's something about this house. Something about the way the guest room door never stays fully shut. About the baby monitor. How it crackles with static every night at exactly 3:17 a.m., even though it's not connected to anything. About the way Rachel sometimes hums lullabies she swears she doesn't know. And maybe it's nothing. Maybe it's all in my head. Or maybe, just maybe, someone has been here before. Someone who didn't leave. Or worse, someone Rachel once knew intimately, someone she might be trying to forget or remember. I know this all sounds impossible. I wouldn't believe it myself if I hadn't lived it. But the clues keep piling up. The voices. The footage. The photographs. The secrets people won't talk about. And whatever is going on, it's getting closer. More frequent. More deliberate. I can feel something circling us now, waiting for the moment we look away. And then, last night, I found a lock of hair in the envelope drawer. Baby fine, pale blonde, tied with a faded pink ribbon. I haven't told Rachel. Not yet. Because I think she already knows. And I think she's waiting for me to figure it out. But here's the thing that keeps me up at night. If we never had a baby, who left that hair? And why is someone knocking at our door right now? That knock on the door wasn't loud. It was soft, polite even, like whoever stood on the other side didn't want to draw attention. I hesitated before opening it. Something in my chest tightened as I approached, the same feeling you get when you've left the stove on or forgotten to lock the back door. Low, humming anxiety. When I finally opened it, there was no one there. Just the wind stirring the hedges, a faint scent of lavender in the air, and a small envelope placed carefully on the welcome mat. No address, no stamp, no writing at all. Just a plain manila envelope, sealed with a thin strip of tape. I brought it inside slowly, unsure whether I should open it at all. But when I did, I found something that made the room tilt sideways, a photo. Grainy, black and white, but unmistakably clear. It was Rachel, younger, barely out of her teens, standing beside a woman I didn't recognize, older, sad-eyed, with a protective hand on Rachel's shoulder. And in Rachel's arms was a baby. Not a doll, not a prop. A real baby, eyes closed, wrapped in the same yellow blanket I'd seen in the security footage. On the back of the photo, a message was scribbled in thick, shaky handwriting. Asterisk, you said she was gone. Asterisk. I tried to show the photo to Rachel later that night, but it was gone. I'd left it in my desk drawer, tucked under a folder, and now it wasn't there. I tore the room apart, drawers, boxes, even behind the radiator. Nothing. I hadn't thrown it away. I hadn't moved it. But somehow, it vanished. And the strange part was that everything else was untouched. It wasn't a random search. It was surgical. Someone came into our home, found the exact drawer, took the photo, and left everything else behind. Which means someone is watching. Or someone close to me knows more than they're letting on. That night, I barely slept. Every sound felt amplified. The creak of the floorboards, the hum of the refrigerator, the distant bark of a neighbor's dog. Around 2:45 a.m., I thought I heard crying again.
Faint.
Almost a memory. But when I got up to check, the monitor was silent. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that someone or something was inside our home, hiding in plain sight. The next day, I visited the town records office, hoping to find anything about the previous owners of our house. The clerk, an older woman named Bonnie, seemed hesitant when I mentioned the address. She leaned in closer and whispered, "You're not the first one to ask." I pushed, asking what she meant, but she grew quiet, told me to check the 2006 files. I pulled them up and found something unexpected, a police report. Apparently, a baby had gone missing from that very house nearly 2 decades ago. The mother had claimed the baby died during sleep, but no death certificate was ever filed. The case was quietly closed. No charges. No further investigation. Just forgotten.
Buried.
But the name listed on the file was a Manning. It was Elliot. Amanda Elliot. And when I searched for any relatives under that name, my heart nearly stopped. Amanda Elliot had one daughter, Rachel Elliot, before she changed her last name after college. I sat in the parking lot for a long time, gripping the steering wheel, trying to make sense of it. Rachel had never mentioned her mother's name. She told me she was raised by distant relatives after her parents died in a car crash. I never questioned it. But now there was proof that not only had her mother lived into her adulthood, but that she'd been involved in something terrible. And Rachel had lied. Not just once. Over and over again. About her past, her family, even her name. When I got home, I decided to confront her. But as I walked through the door, I saw someone standing in our living room. A man I didn't recognize. Late 40s maybe, clean-cut, dressed in a collared shirt like he belonged at a PTA meeting. Rachel stood beside him, pale and rigid. She looked at me with wide eyes, like I wasn't supposed to be home. The man smiled and held out his hand. "I'm Dr. Harmon," he said. "Family therapist." Rachel called me in just for support. I didn't shake his hand. I stared at her, demanding answers. Rachel tried to explain, fumbling through something about wanting help processing past trauma. But I didn't believe her. Not with everything piling up. Not after the missing photo, the envelope, the police report. I pretended to play along. I sat through the session, answering Dr. Harmon's carefully worded questions, even though every instinct in my body screamed that something was off. He never asked about my feelings, just kept circling around the idea that I was fixating on fantasy, that sometimes grief manifests as paranoia. He kept mentioning grief, but I hadn't lost anyone. At least, not that I knew of. And that's when it hit me. He wasn't there to help. He was there to redirect. To plant doubt. To throw me off the scent. Maybe he was real. Maybe he had credentials. But everything in his manner said he wasn't on my side.
He was Rachel's ally.
Or worse, her handler. That night, I installed a hidden camera in the guest room. I couldn't trust my own memory anymore. I needed something concrete. I reviewed the footage the next morning and there was nothing. Hours of silence. Rachel never entered the room. But I heard her. I know I heard her whispering lullabies around 3 a.m. Even crept up and stood outside the door, hand hovering over the knob. But the video? Totally blank. Like someone had erased it. Or like something didn't want to be recorded. The last straw came when my laptop crashed, completely wiped. Every file, every recording, every email.
Gone.
No warning, no error messages. Just a blank screen and a startup loop that never ends. I took it to a repair shop, but they couldn't retrieve anything. They said it looked like a remote wipe. Someone with access deliberately erased the drive. Which makes me think the emails, the security footage, the baby monitor recordings, they were all being monitored. Someone knew exactly what I was collecting. And they made sure to destroy it before I could act on it. I'm starting to think Rachel isn't just keeping a secret. She's part of something much larger. Something that spans decades. Something that may involve more than just her. Because earlier today, I received a voicemail from a blocked number. A woman's voice.
Calm. Soft.
Familiar. Asterisk, you were never supposed to find the box. Asterisk, click. That was it. But here's what really messed me up. I played the voicemail out loud, and Rachel walked into the room. She didn't say a word. She just turned pale and smiled. I stood there, clutching the phone, the air between us suddenly so heavy it was hard to breathe. That smile, soft, knowing, completely detached from the fear or confusion I expected, stuck with me in a way I can't explain. It wasn't a "you caught me" smile. It was something deeper.
Sadder.
Like she knew everything was spiraling and had already accepted it. Rachel said nothing. Just walked past me, humming that same lullaby I'd heard in the recordings, like the voicemail hadn't just cracked open an entirely new dimension of this nightmare. After she disappeared upstairs, I just stood there, feeling like the house itself was closing in. The silence, the familiar creaks of the floorboards, the soft static that still poured from the baby monitor. I felt like I was being watched. Not by her. By something else. Something old. Something that had been here long before we arrived. It wasn't until the next morning that I realized this wasn't just about me anymore. I got a call from my sister, Hannah, who lives 2 states away in Arizona. We're not incredibly close, not since life pulled us in different directions, but we talk enough that hearing her voice tremble like that set off alarms. She said she received a package, no return address, no postmark, just left on her doorstep. Inside was a single item, a faded birth certificate. But it wasn't hers. It was mine. Except it wasn't the version I'd seen growing up. This one listed different names for my parents, different entirely. The date matched, the hospital matched, but the parents' names? They were strangers. And the mother's name? Amanda Elliott. The same woman in the police report. The same woman standing next to Rachel in the photo that vanished. Hannah asked if it was some kind of prank, but I couldn't speak. My throat felt like it was closing. She didn't know anything about what had been happening. I hadn't told her.
But somehow, someone wanted her involved now.
Someone wanted me to see that this went deeper than Rachel's secrets. It might include mine. I started combing through every childhood document I could get my hands on. School records, medical forms, old letters from our parents. And the more I looked, the more inconsistencies I found. Dates that didn't line up. References to places we never lived. Even in a blurry photograph labeled First Day Home that I had never noticed before, me as a baby, being held by a woman whose face was partially cut off, but whose hands looked eerily familiar. The veins, the ring on her right hand, the thin scar across the knuckle. It looked like Rachel's hand.
But it couldn't be. She's only a few years older than me.
It didn't make sense. None of it did. Unless everything I knew about my life was built on a story someone else crafted. Meanwhile, Rachel's behavior began to shift. She stopped humming. She became more alert, more guarded, like she knew the facade was cracking and had decided to stop pretending. But instead of breaking down, she became clinical. She started locking the guest room, refused to let me in, claimed she was repurposing it as an art space, even though she hadn't painted in years. And then, one morning, I woke up to find her sitting beside me, just watching. Her eyes were open wide, unblinking. I asked her what she was doing, and she said, "I thought I heard her crying again." When I pressed her, who she heard crying, she just whispered, "You'll understand soon." Then she got up and left the room, shutting the door behind her with a click that sounded far too final. That day, I tried reaching out to someone who might offer answers. Rachel's old college roommate, Ellie Parker. I remembered seeing her name on a few graduation photos and tracked her down through alumni social pages. She responded surprisingly fast. Said she'd always wondered if Rachel would ever tell me about the baby. I asked what baby, and she immediately said she couldn't say more over text. She wanted to meet. I booked a flight and planned to leave the next morning. But that night, she was in a car accident. A bad one. She survived, but her phone was destroyed, and when I called the hospital to speak with her, they told me she'd been transferred to a private clinic. No public records listed where. No updates.
Just gone.
That's when I realized something was working behind the scenes to keep this buried. Something with reach. Something with eyes everywhere. The therapist, the wiped laptop, the missing photo, the rewritten birth certificate, and now the only person who tried to talk to me ends up unreachable within hours? Either I was going completely insane, or someone wanted me to question every part of my reality until I gave up. Until I backed off. And yet, I kept digging. The final straw came when I checked the county archives for death records under Amanda Elliott's name. There was one match. Date of death, June 8, 2004. Cause, cardiac arrest. But in the corner of the file, scribbled in red ink, was the word exhumed. No explanation. No details. Just that one word, exhumed, and a date. 2 months ago. That's when I remembered the voicemail. You were never supposed to find the box. The box. The one labeled Ellie. Still sealed. Still sitting in our attic. I should have opened it the moment I found it, but something in me hesitated, like part of me knew that whatever was inside would change everything, would end the guessing, would shatter the fragile illusion that maybe, just maybe, this was all some twisted misunderstanding. And now, as I sit here with that box in front of me, blade in hand, heart pounding louder than the rain tapping against the attic window, I realize something terrifying. The box isn't sealed anymore. The tape's been cut. And someone or something opened it while I was gone. I didn't touch the box at first. I just stared at it, frozen, barely able to breathe. The flap was slightly lifted. The tape peeled back like it had been opened carefully and reclosed just enough to look untouched at a glance. But I knew I hadn't done it. I'd checked the box the night before, still sealed, still waiting. Now something had changed. My mind raced through possibilities, but none of them made sense. Rachel was asleep when I got home, or at least pretending to be. The attic ladder creaked like a dying tree whenever it was pulled down. There was no way someone could have opened that box without making noise. Unless they'd done it while I was gone. Or unless they were already up there, waiting, watching. I gripped the box with shaking hands and slowly peeled it open, my heart pounding so violently I could hear it in my ears. Inside, wrapped in layers of yellowed newspaper and brittle fabric, was an old baby book. The kind parents used to document milestones, first words, first steps, first birthday. But this one had no name on the cover. Just a date, 1998. I flipped it open with trembling fingers. The pages were mostly blank, except for a few early entries, small, neat handwriting, likely Amanda Elliott's. There were check marks next to smiled, sat up, and held bottle, all dated within a few weeks of each other. But then the entries stopped abruptly. The rest of the book was empty, except for one page near the middle, torn partially at the edge, with a single phrase written in large, erratic scrawl, asterisk, she never left. Asterisk, I stared at those words for a long time, unsure if I was supposed to interpret them literally, emotionally, or as a warning. I didn't know whether she referred to Rachel, to the baby, to someone else entirely. But the longer I looked, the more I felt it, that creeping sensation that something unseen was now fully awake, fully aware of me, and not at all pleased with how far I'd come. I didn't sleep that night. I lay on the couch with the lights on, listening for any sound, footsteps, creaks, whispers, anything that might tell me I wasn't alone. My phone buzzed around 2:11 a.m. A text from an unknown number. No words, just an image. At first, I couldn't process what I was looking at. It was dark, grainy, slightly distorted like it had been taken through a window or from a hidden camera.
But then I saw it.
It was me sitting on the couch, the same exact position I was in at that moment. Same blanket. Same cup of tea on the coffee table. The same look of fear on my face. Someone had taken a photo of me from inside my house. I jumped up, checked the doors, windows, corners, closets, nothing. I even checked the attic again. Empty. But the feeling didn't leave. That crawling sensation that I was no longer just being watched. I was being hunted. I tried to call the police, but halfway through dialing, I stopped myself. What was I going to tell them? That I was receiving anonymous packages and messages from dead women? That my wife might be a part of some hidden, generational cover-up involving missing babies and exhumed graves? That someone broke into my attic and opened a decades-old box just to unsettle me? They'd think I'd lost it. Maybe I had. But deep down, I knew that whoever was doing this wasn't trying to hurt me yet. They were warning me, showing me that they could reach me anytime, anywhere, and there was nothing I could do about it. The next day, everything escalated. Hannah, my sister, the one who'd received the strange birth certificate, was gone. Her phone went straight to voicemail. Her social media accounts were wiped clean. Her landlord said she'd moved out suddenly and left no forwarding address. When I called her job, her boss told me she'd resigned via email, which seemed completely out of character for her. She loved that job. And when I asked to see the email, they told me it had already been deleted from their system, as if it had never existed. I knew then, whatever this was, it was no longer about secrets or memories. It was about erasure. Erasing truth. Erasing people. And now they were coming for anyone connected to me. Anyone who might dig too deep. I couldn't think straight. I began spiraling. Every stranger's glance lingered too long. Every car that followed too closely made my pulse spike. I started seeing the same white sedan parked down the street, same time each night. No license plate on the front. Windows tinted. The engine always running. One night, I approached it with a kitchen knife clenched behind my back. But when I got within a few feet, the car peeled away, slow and deliberate. Like they wanted me to know they weren't afraid of me. That I was the one who should be afraid. And still, Rachel acted as if nothing was wrong. In fact, she began to seem lighter, more cheerful, like a burden had been lifted from her shoulders. She cooked dinner, played music, even suggested we go on a weekend trip. "We need to disconnect," she said with that same eerie calm. Just the two of us. It felt like a trap. Like she knew I was unraveling and was now trying to get me alone. Isolated. Somewhere where no one could hear me scream. I pretended to consider it, told her I'd look into places to stay, and she nodded, satisfied, humming again as she walked off to fold laundry. That's when I snuck back to her room and opened the locked drawer in her nightstand, the one I'd always respected before, the one I now knew probably held answers I wasn't supposed to see. Inside were old letters, torn photographs, a burner phone, and a list of names. Most of them were crossed out. But two names remained uncrossed, mine and Hannah's. At the bottom of the page, in Rachel's neat handwriting, it said, asterisk, only one more before we're safe. Asterisk. I put everything back exactly as I found it, heart pounding so hard I felt nauseous. I went back downstairs, sat on the couch, and tried to act normal when Rachel came in with tea. I even smiled. But I knew then, I wasn't just a man uncovering a mystery. I was the final loose end. And I couldn't stop thinking about that phrase in the baby book, "She never left." Because maybe the real danger isn't what Rachel is hiding. Maybe it's what she let back in. The rain came down hard that night, beating against the windows like a warning. I sat in the living room, lights dimmed, staring at the burner phone I'd stolen from Rachel's drawer. I hadn't turned it on yet. Something about it felt dangerous, not just in the physical sense, but existential, like pressing that power button would change the fabric of what I thought was real. My thumb hovered over it for a long time before I finally flicked it on. The screen glowed softly, and almost instantly, it buzzed with a flurry of incoming texts. The timestamps went back months. Most were from one contact. There were no names, no photos, just cryptic messages. Package sent. He's starting to ask. Use the lullaby again. Only two more. I read through them all. Heart sinking, skin going cold. But it was the final message, sent just 3 days ago, that made my blood run still. You're sure he does remember? That single question cracked everything open. I stared at those words, trying to understand what they meant. He doesn't remember. What wasn't I remembering? And why would Rachel need to check? I scrolled back, looked at the message history again, and saw a small icon on one message, a voice memo attachment. I tapped it. It was short, just under 10 seconds. And when I played it, I nearly dropped the phone. It was my voice. Not recent. Younger.
Scared.
Shaking. I didn't mean to. I swear I didn't mean to. Please don't tell her. Please don't let them take her. My knees buckled. I sat down, gasping for air, that cold sense of disorientation crashing over me like a tidal wave. That voice, my asterisk voice, sounded like it came from a version of myself I didn't know existed. I tried to remember, tried to reach back into my childhood, into any moment that might explain what I'd just heard. But there was nothing, just a hazy, grainy sense of distance, like a dream you can't quite recall. I replayed it over and over, listening for context, a background sound, anything. There was nothing but that one panicked plea. The phone buzzed again. A new message. From him. This one was live. Tell me, do you remember now? I dropped the phone, breath caught in my throat. My entire body was trembling. I wanted to believe it was some kind of manipulation, some deep fake, some sick prank. But the voice was too real, too raw. I remembered the emotion. Not the event, but the fear. And that's when the front door opened. Not with a knock. With a key. Rachel stepped inside, soaked from the rain, clutching a small bag in her hand. She saw me on the floor, the burner phone on the table between us. She didn't flinch.
She didn't speak.
She just looked at me with eyes so calm, so steady, I almost screamed. I was hoping you wouldn't find that, she said softly, closing the door behind her. I demanded answers, what the messages meant, what the recording was, who M was, but she only stared at me, like she was watching a child throw a tantrum. Then she said something I'll never forget. You weren't supposed to remember because it wasn't supposed to happen. None of it. She walked past me and opened the bag. Inside were old photos, papers, and something wrapped in cloth. She unwrapped it slowly, deliberately, and laid it on the coffee table. It was a rattle. Wooden, faded pink, initials carved into the side, E. The same initials from the box. The same name from the envelope. The name Ellie. I asked her again, what happened to Ellie?
Who was she?
Who was I to her? Rachel sat down, finally looking shaken. Ellie was ours, she whispered. Both of ours. Not in the way you think. You were there. You found her first. You tried to keep her quiet. You thought you could fix it. But when the noise wouldn't stop, when she wouldn't stop crying, something in you snapped. I felt the floor drop beneath me. No, I said. That's not possible. But she kept going. You were young. Barely a teenager. You didn't understand what you were doing. Amanda told me everything before she died. She said you tried to hide it. That's why your birth records were changed. That's why you were moved out of state. That's why they never found a body. I stood up. My vision swam. It felt like I was being ripped out of my own memories. Could it be true? Could everything I believed about my life be a cover-up? Could my own mind be protecting me from something I'd done? Rachel leaned forward, voice trembling now. You didn't mean to hurt her. You were trying to protect her from someone else. From what was happening in that house. But something went wrong. And Amanda, she couldn't let you be punished for it. So she erased you. Gave you a new life. And I was brought in to keep watch. To help you remember only if it became necessary. I backed away from her, shaking my head. None of it made sense. And yet, every broken piece of the puzzle was suddenly snapping into place. The missing files. The rewritten documents. The fear in my own voice. The way people kept disappearing when they got too close. The constant monitoring. I hadn't been discovering a mystery. I'd been unburying a truth that someone had spent years trying to keep hidden. And just when I thought I couldn't take any more, the doorbell rang. Rachel froze. We both turned. The baby monitor in the guest room suddenly crackled to life. And through the static, a voice, small, high-pitched, impossible, began to sing. It was the same lullaby I'd heard for weeks. But it wasn't Rachel's voice. It wasn't mine. It was a child's. And she was singing from inside the house. I didn't move at first. Neither did Rachel. That lullaby drifting through the monitor paralyzed us both, like our minds couldn't catch up to the reality of what we were hearing. A child's voice, young, soft, haunting, echoing from a room we both knew was empty. The guest room was supposed to be locked. No one had entered it in days. But that song, it wasn't a recording. It was live. You could hear the breath in between the words, the slight tremble in the melody, the way her voice cracked just a little at the highest note. It was real. My body moved before I made the decision. I grabbed the nearest object, an old lamp, and stepped toward the hallway, ignoring Rachel's whispered plea behind me to stop. My heart thundered in my ears as I reached the door. I could feel her watching me, silently begging me not to go any further. But I couldn't turn back now. I opened the door. The room was empty, completely undisturbed. No child, no monitor, just a faint trace of lavender in the air, Rachel's favorite scent, and that eerie sense that I was being watched. I turned toward the monitor on the nightstand. The green light was still glowing, still active.
But there was no sound now.
Just silence. Rachel stood in the doorway behind me, her face pale, her eyes wide with a fear I hadn't seen before. Not fear of me, but of something else. Something bigger than both of us. "You weren't supposed to go in here," she whispered. "They told me if you did, it would start again." I turned to her, anger boiling over. "Who are they? How long have you been lying to me? And what exactly did I do that's so horrible you've been hiding it behind fake names and burner phones and secret lullabies?" She didn't answer. Not with words. She reached into her pocket and handed me a small envelope. My name was written on it, not the name I'd gone by my whole life, but another name, one I didn't recognize, but somehow felt disturbingly familiar. Inside the envelope was a folded photograph. Old, worn, fraying at the edges. A group shot, maybe from a camp or a retreat. And there I was. Younger, maybe 12 or 13, standing next to a girl. A girl with those same initials. Someone had written, the last summer, on the back in faded ink. I studied every detail. The trees in the background. The people's faces. One stood out. A counselor, grinning awkwardly, holding a clipboard. It was Rachel. Younger, but unmistakably her. She'd known me long before we ever met, or so I thought. She hadn't just come into my life by chance. She'd been planted there. And now I had to know everything. I demanded the truth. No more riddles. No more delays. She shook her head, tears finally forming in her eyes. "They said if you ever remembered, really remembered, you'd be next. Just like Amanda. Just like Ellie. And me." It was then that I realized how far this thing went. It wasn't just about a lost child or a repressed memory. It was about a system, an organized, deliberate cover-up. A project, maybe. A program. Something designed to test or contain whatever happened that summer. And, for some reason, I was central to it. But the worst part wasn't what I'd done, it was what they might make me do again. That night, I stayed up going through every item Rachel had hidden over the years. Journals, photographs, printed emails, old tapes. I sat in the basement, piecing together a life I didn't remember living, listening to voices that once belonged to people I may have loved or hurt. And then the phone rang. Not the burner, my real phone. I didn't recognize the number. I answered. The voice on the other end was familiar, but not Rachel's. Not Amanda's. It was deeper, male, steady. "It's time," he said. "You either come back and finish what you started, or we'll finish it for you. You know what we're capable of." I couldn't breathe. "What are you talking about?" I asked. "Finish what?" "You'll understand when you see her." The line went dead. I stared at the phone, hands shaking, the ultimatum sinking in. If I pursued the truth, if I pushed further, I'd be putting Rachel in danger. Maybe myself. Maybe others I didn't even know about. But if I walked away, if I obeyed whatever threat was hanging over me, I'd never find out what really happened to Ellie. I'd never know if she was even real, or just the echo of a broken memory. Rachel came downstairs, holding a box. Her eyes were red from crying. "If you're going," she said, "you'll need this." Inside were coordinates written on yellowed paper and a small photo of a building deep in the woods. Faded lettering across the front read, "Black Hollow Institute." It looked abandoned, overgrown, like it hadn't been touched in years. "This is where they erased you," she said, "and where it all began." And just like that, I knew I had no choice. I could run and pretend none of this happened, or I could go to that place, face whoever or whatever had destroyed my past. The risk wasn't just losing my mind. It was losing what little of my identity I had left. But I couldn't keep living in shadows. Not anymore. I packed a bag, wrote a note, and as I stepped out the door, I glanced once more at Rachel, wondering if I'd ever see her again, or if, by the end of this, I'd even know who she really was. Then I heard the monitor crackle back to life behind me. The same lullaby. Only this time, it ended with a whisper. "Don't trust her." The dirt road to Black Hollow twisted through miles of dense pine, the trees like silent sentinels watching my every move. The deeper I drove, the less reliable my GPS became, until finally, it blinked out altogether, leaving me alone with nothing but the sound of my tires grinding over gravel and the faint, metallic rattle of nerves in my chest. My phone had no signal. I should have turned back, but something inside me had already crossed the line. The need to know had taken root so deep, it didn't matter how scared I was. It had eclipsed everything else. Rachel's final words replayed over and over in my mind. Asterisk, this is where they erased you. Asterisk, what the hell had they erased?
Who were they?
And how had I let this happen right under my nose, living beside a woman who clearly knew more about me than I knew about myself? The first thing I saw as I approached the clearing was the watchtower, rusted, leaning, and half-consumed by vines, like it hadn't been used in decades. But the ground was disturbed. Fresh tire tracks. Heavy military grade. That building wasn't abandoned. Not anymore. I parked a safe distance away and approached on foot, staying low, weaving through the undergrowth. As I got closer, I noticed the building had a new lock. A keypad. Freshly installed. And then something unexpected. A second car parked in the shadows. A white SUV. My heart stopped. It was Rachel's. I almost shouted her name, but something made me stop. Instead, I crept toward the side window and peeked inside. No sign of her. The building's side door was slightly ajar, and there was muffled shouting inside. One of the voices was hers. The other one. I knew that voice. I didn't know from where, but it triggered something cold and raw in me. A memory just out of reach. I slipped inside through the door, the stench of mold and antiseptic hitting me all at once. The place looked like a clinic and a lab and a prison all in one. Metal cots, security cameras with broken wires dangling, and posters on the wall that were eerily childlike. Every child is special. Learning is love. But what kind of learning happened in a place like this? I followed the voices down a hallway and peered into a room through a broken window. Rachel stood with her back to me, her hands raised in a pleading gesture. Across from her stood a man in a lab coat with a sidearm clipped to his belt. Gray hair. Thin glasses. Ice-cold demeanor. And next to him was Amanda. I stumbled back, nearly gasping out loud. She wasn't dead. She wasn't missing. She was here, alive, and standing beside the man like she belonged there. Rachel saw me through the glass, and for a moment, everything slowed. Her face changed, relief, fear, and something else.
Guilt.
The man turned. Well, he said. Looks like the prodigal son finally came home. I was dragged into the room by 2 guards before I could run. The gun was taken from my waistband, and they shoved me into a chair. The man introduced himself as Dr. Cormack, Director of Behavioral Memory Division at Black Hollow. He said it so matter-of-factly, like it was some government department you could look up online. But this wasn't anywhere on any map. Dr. Cormack walked slowly toward me, hands behind his back like a general. You want the truth?
Fine.
Here it is. You volunteered. You signed up to forget. You begged us to wipe it. But then, like all of them, you broke protocol. You left, you ran, and something triggered your memory anyway. That girl, Ellie, wasn't real. She was a part of the program. A construct. A tether. And now, thanks to your curiosity, that tether's unraveling. I was numb. What program? Rachel's voice cracked from behind me. Project Child Echo. They used people, traumatized, broken people, to test how far memory can be manipulated. They implanted synthetic grief. Gave you fake families. Monitored how long the illusion held before the subject broke down. I couldn't even speak. My legs felt like jelly. So, you're saying none of it was real? Not Amanda? Not Ellie? Not even. Dr. Cormack cut me off. Not your name. Not your marriage. Not your life. I turned to Amanda. Why are you here? She smirked. I was never missing. I was monitoring you. We all were. You were subject 12. Our longest-running case. Until Rachel fell in love with you and broke the rules. Rachel stepped forward, tears in her eyes. I didn't fall in love with the subject. I fell in love with you, the real you, before I even knew who you were. I tried to keep you away from this, but I couldn't stop what was coming. Dr. Cormack's smile disappeared. Enough. We can't have loose ends. We'll re-administer the protocol. Full reset. You won't remember any of this. But something had changed in me. Maybe it was rage. Maybe it was grief. Or maybe it was that terrible moment of realizing the last decade of my life had been scripted, rehearsed, manufactured. I lunged, knocking the chair backward and grabbing the sidearm from the guard's belt. Everything exploded into chaos.
Shouts.
Alarms. Rachel screamed my name as I ran through the halls, past the rooms with observation windows, past the cabinets filled with files, each labeled with a name and a year. Subject 03, Lily D. Rejection phase, terminated. Subject 08, Mark R. Successful implant, recurrent signs present. And then Subject 12, me. My file. My entire life in a manila folder. And inside it, one word written in red. Reactivated. That's when it hit me. They hadn't made me forget everything. They'd left something behind. A trigger. A seed. Something they knew would eventually bloom again. And I was never the only one. I burst out of the East Wing doors with the folder clutched to my chest, adrenaline coursing like fire through my veins. Behind me, alarms wailed and footsteps thundered. Rachel was somewhere inside still, maybe detained or worse, but I couldn't think about that yet. I had the file, the truth, and a choice. Run or confront the architect of this nightmare. And I knew I couldn't live another day without answers. So I didn't run. I headed straight for the Central Command building. The storm overhead split the sky in two, lightning illuminating the black hollow compound like a nightmare caught in a camera flash. My hand shook as I swiped a stolen keycard at the steel-reinforced door. It hissed open, revealing rows of monitors, old servers humming in sync, and at the center of it all, Dr. Cormack. He didn't look surprised to see me. He stood at the console, calmly shutting off the alarms like he was turning off a sprinkler system after a light rain. I figured you'd come here, he said without looking at me. I was curious how far you'd make it before your brain gave out. You've lasted longer than any of them. I threw the file onto the metal table with a loud slap. So this is it? Just experiments and numbers to you? You erased people. Gave them fake children. Families. Love. You broke them. Cormack turned, and for the first time, I saw something in his eyes. Not cruelty, certainty. Belief. You don't understand what we're doing here. Memory is the last great frontier. And love, true love, is the most potent, dangerous memory of all. If we can manufacture that, we can control everything. Empathy, loyalty, even grief. You were the perfect subject. You loved the ghost of a child that never existed. And that love made you fight. I stepped forward, fists clenched. You think this makes you a genius? You think it makes you a god? All it makes you is evil. He smiled, slow and chilling. You still think this is about you. Then he tapped a key on the console, and every screen in the room flickered to life. There were dozens of faces, men, women, teenagers, all seated in similar rooms across the country. Monitored. Wired. Watched. You are Subject 12, yes, he said. But this program? It's bigger than you could possibly comprehend. Black Hollow isn't one facility. It's a network, every major city. Every false disappearance you've ever seen on the news. Every viral video where someone claimed they remembered a child that never existed. Those are echoes. Controlled releases. We plant grief. Watch how society responds. How trauma spreads. My knees nearly buckled. Why? Because if we can engineer collective grief, he said, stepping closer, we can control collective behavior. Elections. Riots. Loyalty to authority. It's the ultimate psychological weapon. I wanted to scream, punch him. But then I saw something on the screen behind him. One of the subjects, Subject 03, Lily D. She looked like Rachel. Younger, paler, scared. The monitor indicated her location, Brooklyn facility, active session running. My throat went dry. You've got Rachel's sister in this program. Cormack shrugged. That was the deal. Rachel was never just your handler. She was desperate to get her sister back. She cooperated with us in exchange for one thing. After you were reset, we'd let her see her sister one last time. A knife twisted in my chest. So Rachel had been lying, but also not. She did care. Maybe it hadn't started that way, but the love had become real. Even if everything else was synthetic. Cormac walked to the console and typed in a command. I can fix this for you. Erase everything again. You go back to the surface. You think you're normal. You never ask questions again. Or you walk out with that file, leak it, and the entire system goes underground. We'll burn Black Hollow to the ground and move it offshore. And everyone else in those chairs? They'll disappear. Like your daughter did. I froze. My hand hovered over the folder. This was the choice. Stay blind and be safe, or fight and lose everyone again. But that's when I remembered Ellie's laughter, the sound that never made sense in my head, but always felt right. And I remembered Rachel standing between me and the guards, saying she loved me when she didn't have to. So I didn't answer. I acted. I grabbed the emergency axe behind the fire case and slammed it into the console, sparks flying as I cleaved through power relays and data hubs. The screens went dark. Sirens screamed. Cormac lunged, but I tackled him to the ground, fists hammering down until his nose cracked and blood sprayed across the tile. You don't get to rewrite me again, I growled. And just when I thought it was over, a shot rang out. I collapsed to the floor, bracing for the pain, but it wasn't me. Cormac staggered back, a red bloom on his chest. Rachel stood at the entrance, holding the gun with trembling hands. He would have never stopped, she whispered. Not until he erased you. She helped me up, and we watched the facility burn from the hilltop. The servers, the research, the memories, all of it reduced to ash. We didn't speak as we walked back through the forest, side by side, covered in smoke and blood and secrets. We didn't need to. The silence was heavy, but honest. But just as we reached the road, my phone buzzed. No signal bars. No apps. Just one message from an unknown number. It said, *subject 12. Termination failed. Reset sequence incomplete. *. And beneath that a file attachment, one I hadn't seen before. A video of Ellie, smiling, saying, Hi, Daddy. But this time, the background wasn't a fake nursery or a lab-created playroom. It was my real house, recorded yesterday. So I ask you, now that you've heard everything, do you really believe your memories belong to you? Because I'm not so sure anymore. It's been 3 months since Black Hollow was reduced to ash. 3 months since I last saw Rachel disappear into the fog of that remote highway, her face stained with tears, carrying nothing but a flash drive and a pistol. We didn't say goodbye. We just looked at each other one final time, knowing we'd both carry pieces of this horror for the rest of our lives, pieces that couldn't be stitched back together no matter how hard we tried. The story we were caught in, this psychological experiment masquerading as life, had taken too much from both of us. We were never victims in a simple narrative. We were pawns in a system so deeply embedded, so surgically precise, it blurred the lines between choice and conditioning. I stayed in hiding for weeks, watching the news, listening for clues that the story had broken. But it never did. No leaks. No exposé. No arrests. The world moved on just like it always does. Even now, when I sit in the quiet of my small new apartment in upstate New York, far from where it all began, I hear her voice sometimes, Rachel's, not Ellie's, urging me to let it go. To live again. To stop chasing the ghosts. But how do you stop looking for someone who is never supposed to exist? I replay that final video every night before I sleep. The one that showed Ellie, Ellie, laughing and calling me daddy in a place that looked unmistakably like my own kitchen. The timestamp never changes. It always says it was recorded the day after the facility burned down, which is impossible. Unless it's not. Unless what Cormac built didn't die with him. Unless someone else picked up the pieces. I tried everything. Ran it through video analysis tools, reverse image searches, even tracked the metadata using a darknet protocol Rachel once taught me. And the only thing I ever found was a server ping from Arizona near a decommissioned Air Force base. When I drove out there, Desperate, half-crazed, all I found was a chain-link fence wrapped in decades of silence. No people. No footprints. Just an odd humming under the ground, like something was buried deeper than anyone wanted to admit. And when I closed my eyes and pressed my ear to the soil, I swear I could hear the sound of a child humming softly. A lullaby I never remembered teaching Ellie, but one I couldn't get out of my head ever since. In the days that followed, I started noticing other things, patterns I used to ignore. A woman crying at a bus stop, whispering a child's name that wasn't on her lips a second ago. A man staring blankly at a broken music box in a thrift shop, muttering, "She loved this one," even though no daughter stood beside him. Online forums were filled with posts that sounded eerily familiar. People claiming they remembered a child who wasn't on any birth certificate, people dreaming about nurseries that didn't exist in their homes. And in every thread, every account, one name kept coming up in coded whispers: Project Reverie. A name I'd never heard while inside the facility. A continuation? A new phase? Or maybe just a lie, seeded by the architects of control, knowing that someone like me would keep digging. I tried to move on. I did. I even took a job at a small bookstore in town, surrounded by the smell of paper and dust and stories that had nothing to do with trauma. I smiled when customers walked in. I nodded politely. I even started journaling again, writing down everything I could remember about the days before Rachel, before Ellie, before the voices in the walls and the shadows behind the nursery door. But it never brought peace. Not really. Because there was one truth I couldn't escape, one certainty more terrifying than anything Cormac ever told me. Memory isn't just fragile, it's programmable. If they could plant a child in my life, shape my identity around a lie so real it broke me to lose her, then how much of me was me to begin with? And if they could take her away, maybe, just maybe, they could give her back. One night, as snow fell thick against my windows and the bookstore was silent and locked, I found a small envelope slipped under the front door. No postage. No return address. Inside was a Polaroid. Ellie again. Same red jacket. Same half-smile. Only this time, she wasn't in my kitchen. She was standing in front of a white clapboard house with a green mailbox. One I'd never seen before. On the back of the photo was a handwritten note in shaky pen. Asterisk, come home. We remember you. Asterisk, and just like that, the quiet life I had stitched together began to unravel. I haven't told anyone about the photo. I haven't called Rachel. I haven't tried to trace the handwriting or analyze the ink. I just keep it folded in my wallet like a map to a place that might not even exist. Maybe it's bait. Maybe it's a final test. Or maybe, just maybe, it's real. I don't know what I'll do yet. But I do know this. Once you've heard your wife talk to a baby you've never had, once you've held a memory that doesn't belong to any timeline, you stop trusting the shape of reality. You stop believing in closure. You start believing in layers, onion skin layers, of consciousness and control and secrets buried just beneath your waking life. So if you're still watching, still trying to make sense of this, I want to leave you with this thought. How many of your memories are truly yours? That childhood friend who moved away before you ever got to say goodbye. That familiar song you swear you used to sing to someone in the backseat. That name that pops into your head when you walk by an old elementary school playground. What if those aren't just dreams or nostalgia? What if they're markers, breadcrumbs left behind by something bigger than any of us? Don't ignore them. Don't brush them off. Because the truth is, the past isn't behind us anymore. It's being rewritten every day. And someone, somewhere, is watching how well you remember. Or how easily you forget.